So, literally after I got done doing the Sovereign Citizens video, it started fucking snowing. Like, dude, all this warm ass weather we've been getting weather in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Then all of a sudden on a random day like this, the shit just starts snowing. But you know, whatever, that's that Michigan weather for you. So, we're gonna be on Top 5 Unknowns channel today. This video is going to be called 5 Murders Committed in the Name of Love. Just from the title itself, you can already assume what it's going to be: people who have committed murders in the name of love. So let's see what type of murders that has been committed in this video here.
Love can make people do some of the strangest things, from giving their sweetheart expensive gifts to becoming obsessed with the object of their affection. Sometimes love can be dangerous. Crazy, obsessive lovers are often subject to headlines as their love and obsession leads them to committing terrible crimes. Here are 5 scary murders done in the name of love. Number 5. Clara and David Harris were happily married with 3 children, a beautiful house, expensive cars, and successful careers as dentists. You could say that the Houston, Texas couple had it all and lived what many would consider the American dream. Everything seemed perfect until July of 2003, when David admitted to his wife that he'd been having an affair with the receptionist, Gail Bridges, from his dental practice. This news completely devastated Clara, and she became frantic in her efforts to keep her husband. Clara saw Gail as the younger, prettier woman that her husband had swapped her out for. She began going to the gym, changing her appearance through dyeing her hair, and even made a breast augmentation consultation in the hopes of wooing her husband back into her life. When all of these efforts seemed to fail, Clara moved on to more dangerous tactics. Obsessed with her husband's affair, Clara hired a private investigator to follow him and Gail and report back on their every move. On July 24, 2002, Clara got a call from the PI stating that he had seen David and Gail at a nearby Hilton hotel together. Enraged, Clara drove her Mercedes-Benz straight to the hotel to confront her husband and his mistress. In the lobby of the Hilton, Clara lunged at Gail and slapped her, screaming, "He's my husband." The 3 of them were asked to leave the hotel lobby by security and took their dispute into the parking lot. In what seemed like a de-escalation of the argument, Clara jumped back into her car and started the engine. Only Clara wasn't planning on driving away from the scene. Instead, she put her foot to the floor and sped towards David and Gail as they were making their way to their own cars. Sadly, David was unable to get out of the way of the charging car, and he was struck, throwing him 25 feet across the parking lot. Not satisfied with what she had done yet, Clara spun the car around and drove over her husband a further 2 times, ensuring that he was dead. In February 2003, Clara stood trial for the murder of her husband, David Harris. The court found her guilty of murdering her husband and commented that she was acting under sudden passion, which sometimes carries a prison sentence of 20 years. Clara was also ordered to pay a $10,000 fine. As of 2018, Clara is a free woman after just serving 16 of her 20-year sentence. The friends and loved ones of David are saddened that the woman responsible for taking the life of their loved one had to serve just 16 years in prison, while they're the ones serving a life sentence without David.
Look, dog, a couple things I want to say about that. Number one, if he was having an affair with you, you should have just left him. That's number one. 2, I get that they're upset that she got off for killing her husband, their family, but when you do some shit like that to somebody, you can't tell them how to react to a situation, you know? So you can't be like, oh, well, she shouldn't have done that. Don't get me wrong. She should have just left him alone. But I'm not saying she's justified in killing him either. It's just that when you do things, because if you're having an affair with somebody, then you're hurting your spouse, especially since you told them that you're having an affair and you're still having an affair with that person. It's like, what did you, I mean, shit, you're purposely hurting your spouse at this point by admitting to it and still doing it. So at that point, it's like, you can't tell her how to be like, how to react to that shit at that point. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm probably saying all this shit now. I'm probably being logical right now, but at some point in the future, maybe somebody will do the same thing to me and I react the same way that she do. You know, there's no way in telling how somebody's gonna react to a situation. Is what I'm saying. So there's faults on both sides. Dude shouldn't have been stepping out. He should have just left her, and she shouldn't have reacted the way she did and killed this dude. She should have just left him alone after she found out about the affair. But people would rather keep the title of being married instead of just getting a divorce and then being with whoever you want. You rather just have an affair and still be with the spouse. That shit doesn't make no sense to me.
Number 4. Teenage love is always tricky. With jealousy, immaturity, and broken hearts, many teens get themselves caught up in their romantic lives. For Rachel Wade, she wasn't about to let another girl get in the way of love. 19-year-old Rachel and Joshua had previously been in a relationship. However, in the beginning of 2009, the couple had broken up, much to the dismay of Rachel, who was desperate to keep Joshua. Not only was Rachel mad because she couldn't be with the man she loved, but she was angry because he'd just started seeing someone new, 18-year-old Sarah Ludman. Rachel began a campaign of hate against Sarah, all because she was with Joshua. Rachel left voicemails, made threats to each other, would send texts and rivalry, which soon turned physical. Rachel would turn up at Sarah's work just so she could get into an argument with her and taunt her. Clearly, her resentment was towards Sarah and not her ex-boyfriend. The harassment came to a boiling point on April.
She shouldn't have no resentment at all. They broke up. What? That'd have been one thing if he was cheating on her, but they broke up with each other. She's the one who decided not to leave him alone.
April 14th, 2009. According to her testimony, Rachel was out walking her dog when Sarah drove past and screamed, "Stay away from my man." Seemingly, this pattern of harassment had been normal between the two girls, but on this day, Rachel said that she felt scared and threatened by Sarah's actions. Rachel decided that she'd had enough of the harassment and taunting and called one of her ex-boyfriends to come with her while she confronted the pair. This wasn't just a simple confrontation though. On her way out of the apartment, she grabbed a steak knife and placed it in her purse. At around 11 p.m. on April 14th, Rachel approached her ex's house, where both Sarah and Joshua were playing video games and chatting together. A series of texts were sent back and forth, with Sarah and Joshua arguing and sending petty remarks. Rachel waited outside of the apartment to see if Sarah would come outside, but they didn't until midnight. Joshua's sister was home with Sarah and Joshua that evening, and Sarah had agreed to take her to a local McDonald's in her car. On the way there, Sarah spoke to a friend who told her that Rachel had gone back to Javier's house, Rachel's ex-boyfriend. Angry at the previous events of the evening, Sarah dropped by to confront Rachel and her abusive and harassing behavior. Upon arriving there, she saw Rachel standing out front talking to Javier and another friend. According to Rachel's testimony, Sarah slammed on the brakes and almost hit her in the process. However, evidence put forward by the prosecution says that Sarah stopped her car and stayed inside and didn't get out to confront Rachel. This was the moment that Rachel struck, stabbing Sarah in the shoulder and chest, with one of the wounds going to her heart, proving to be fateful for the 18-year-old. Sarah was pronounced dead at 2:20 a.m. on the morning of April 15, 2009. Rachel was soon apprehended as there were many witnesses to the crime. According to witness reports, Rachel simply threw the knife into the yard and yelled, "I'm done." Rachel Wade was found guilty of second-degree murder and was sentenced to 27 years in prison.
Second degree? What?
According to witness reports, Rachel simply threw the knife into the yard and yelled, "I'm done." The 2-year-old. Sarah was pronounced dead at 2:20 a.m. on the...
Hold up right quick. I'm about to go back just a little bit. Oh, right here.
Angry at the previous events of the evening, Sarah dropped by to confront Rachel and her abusive and harassing behavior. Upon arriving there, she saw Rachel standing out front talking to Javier and another friend. According to Rachel's testimony, Sarah slammed on the brakes and almost hit her in the process. However, evidence put forward by the prosecution says that Sarah stopped her car and stayed inside and didn't get out to confront Rachel. This was the moment that Rachel struck, stabbing Sarah in the shoulder and chest, with one of the wounds going to her heart, proving to be fateful for the 18-year-old. Sarah was pronounced dead at 2:20 a.m. on the morning of April 15, 2009. Rachel was soon apprehended as there were many witnesses to the crime. According to witness reports, Rachel simply threw the knife into the yard and yelled, "I'm done." Rachel Wade was found guilty of second-degree murder and was sentenced to 27 years in prison.
Gotcha.
Numerous appeals have been filed by Rachel, as she claims the murder was in self-defense, but so far, all appeals have been denied.
Okay, so what she probably did was just entered a plea deal and just got it for second degree murder instead of like first degree, where she had to like spend life in prison or something. So that's probably what happened. Now,
Number 3.
I kind of missed that shit for a second. I'm like, what the fuck, second degree?
In 1990, Melinda Loveless began dating Amanda Heverin, and what should have been a lovely teenage romance would end in one of the most horrific murders Indiana has ever seen. Loveless had her own issues and was described as erratic and depressed and was in therapy to help quell her issues. As many teenage romances go, the relationship between Loveless and Heverin soon deteriorated and the pair stopped seeing each other. At the time of their breakup, Heverin became friends with 12-year-old Shanda Scherer, leading Loveless to become jealous of the attention that she was receiving. On January 10, 1992, Loveless, Tony Lawrence, Hope Ripley, and Laurie Tackett hatched a plan to intimidate the 12-year-old with hopes that she would back off from Heverin, leading Loveless and her to be reunited once again. The four lured Scherer into their car and drove her around and eventually took her into Witch's Castle in Utica, Indiana. Once at their location, they took Scherer out of the car and tied her up using rope. The Witch's Castle is hardly a secluded location, so the girls ended up taking Scherer off of a logging road where Loveless and Tackett began their horrific torture of the poor 12-year-old girl. Scherer was stripped and beaten by Loveless and Tackett, including an injury that caused her own braces to cut her mouth open. As if this beating wasn't enough, Loveless and Tackett took turns stabbing her in some sort of sick game between the two. The pair then strangled Scherer to make sure that she was unconscious, although it's likely that they believed that she had passed away. Once they had moved Scherer's body back into the car, Tackett beat her again when Scherer began to wake up from the confusion. To further add to Scherer's agony, the girls taunted her, shouting, "You're not looking so hot now, are you?" The horrific end to Scherer's life came that morning when the girls took her to an area just off of US 421. Here, she was placed on the ground, wrapped in a blanket, doused in gasoline, and set on fire. The most disturbing part in all of this is that Scherer was still alive. After a short investigation, all of the four girls involved were arrested in order to stand trial as adults for the horrific murder of Shanda Scherer. Tackett and Loveless were sentenced to serve 60 years in an Indianapolis women's prison, and Lawrence was sentenced to serve 20 years, with Rippey later also being required to serve 60 years. Rippey was released in 2006 following good behavior. Melinda Loveless, the mastermind behind the plan, was released in 2019 when she was 43 years old. Loveless well and truly believed that if she got rid of innocent 12-year-old Scherer, she'd be reunited with her lover.
What? What the fuck is wrong with these people? Dog, she killed both of them because of attention.
Number 2. Krista Gale Pike was born on March 10, 1976, in West Virginia to Glenn Pike and Carissa Hansen. Pike would cement herself in history books by becoming the youngest woman to be sentenced to death in the US. Pike did not have the best start in life. She was troubled from an early age and dropped out of high school. Wanting to improve her career aspects and get back on track, Pike joined the Job Corps, which is a government program to help young people get into work. It was here that Pike met Daryl Shipp, who was 1 year younger than her. The pair got on like a house on fire, and it was reported that the pair were into the occult and worshiping the devil. Things turned ugly very quickly. Pike was extremely jealous of fellow classmate, 19-year-old Colleen Slimmer, who Pike thought was trying to steal Shipp away from her. This claim is highly refuted by Slimmer's friends to this day. Pike, along with her friend, 18-year-old Shadola Peterson, hatched a plan to lure Slimmer to an isolated area near the University of Tennessee campus. Once there, they would strike on Slimmer. January 12, 1995 would be that day. Pike, Shipp Peterson, and Slimmer all signed out of Job Corps' dormitory and headed towards the woods. The trio told Slimmer that they wanted to sort out an argument and smoke weed together. Once they reached an area secluded enough, Pike and Shipp attacked Slimmer, while Peterson acted as their lookout. For over 30 minutes, Pike and Shipp taunted, beat, and slashed Slimmer, even going as far as to carve a large pentagram into her chest. Once the pair had finished torturing her, Pike grabbed a large piece of asphalt and smashed her skull with it, killing her instantly. As a trophy, Pike decided to keep Slimmer's skull. It didn't take long before Pike was showing off the piece of the skull around school, bragging as she went. This would be the downfall of the trio, as just 36 hours later, they were arrested.
No shit, you snitched
on March
yourself.
22nd, 1996, after only a few hours of the jury deliberating, Pike was found guilty of murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The jury were shown a piece of Slimmer's skull that Pike had kept and also her confession. On March 30th, 1996, Pike was handed the death sentence by electrocution for the murder of Slimmer, and 25 years in prison for conspiracy to commit murder. Shipp was given a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 32 years for his involvement in the murder. Peterson turned on the pair and acted as an informant for police, and for this, she received probation for pleading guilty to being an accessory to murder.
I'm gonna have to go back and look at that one.
Number 1. Diane Downs was a single mother of 3 living in Springfield, Oregon. Downs and her husband were estranged, leaving Diane to work and raise the children as a single parent. Diane did her best and worked for the U.S. Postal Service to provide a stable and happy upbringing for her children. This was until she found a new man in her life, Robert Knickerbocker. Only Robert didn't want children, and Diane was not going to let him get away. Disturbingly, Diane hatched a plan that sprung into action on May 19, 1983, a plan that would ensure her children never got in the way of her love. On May 19th, Diane hatched a plan that sprung into action on May 19, 1983, a plan that would ensure her children never got in the way of her love. On May 19th, Diane took her 3 children, Stephen Daniel, Cheryl Lynn, and Christy, ages 4, 7, and 9 respectively, for a ride down the country lanes of Oregon, something that struck investigators as very odd. While on the drive, Downs claimed that a shaggy-haired man flagged her down on the side of the road. Downs thought that the man had possibly run into car trouble and pulled over to see how she could help. It was here that, according to Downs' reports, she was carjacked and a strangler pulled a gun on her and her children. Her 7-year-old daughter, Cheryl, had been fatally shot, with Diane also taking a bullet to her left arm. Once at the hospital, things became very clear to investigators and medical staff who responded to the horrific tragedy. It was clear that Diane had only been a few miles away from the hospital at the time of the carjacking, yet she'd only driven around 7 miles per hour instead of the high-speed rush she described to police. This piece of evidence was backed up by a witness who saw Diane that night. On June 17, 1984, Diane Downs was sentenced to life in prison, plus an additional 50 years for the murder and attempted murder of her 3 children. Her eldest daughter, Christy, bravely testified once she'd recovered from her injuries that her mother had shot all 3 of them before shooting herself in the arm to make it look like a carjacking. Diane Downs was subsequently diagnosed as being narcissistic and had antisocial personality disorder, all of which contributed to the murder of her innocent 7-year-old. The court argued that Diane had attempted to kill her 3 children so that she could just be with her lover, Knickerbocker. Thank you guys so
What the fuck? God damn. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back and watch number 2, and then I will be right back. Okay, so I think I've seen exactly all I wanted to see here. Okay, so I just went back on this one just to kind of understand, because I was on my phone texting some people because I kept getting notifications and shit. But anyway, I didn't really understand it at first because I was like, oh shit, because I was missing a bunch of key details. So I was like, damn, what the fuck does this have to do about, love and shit? So the woman thought that another classmate was trying to steal somebody from her, and then she lured this girl off campus and killed her with 3 other people. This one here, I mean, she had children, 3 of them. She met a dude. She didn't want her own kids getting in the way, so she killed all 3 of them. I knew what I was getting into when I decided to watch this shit, but I didn't know it was gonna go this hard, bro. Yeah, the title was self-explanatory, but no one would have predicted that these people would go through shit like killing their own children because they wanted them out of the way so she could be with dog. This shit is crazy as hell, man. But that's just the thing, man. All of these is simple. Yeah, these motherfuckers is obviously crazy as fuck. But with the first one here, you can kind of it's if this wasn't a real life case that happened, it's I could be willing to be okay, well, you can see how in both of these cases, both persons was wrong. Both people were wrong in this. But you could see why she reacted the way that she did. But at the same time, I don't really feel comfortable with saying that because she actually killed this dude. This is a real life thing. So like I'm kind of like mixed on this. Like, yeah, I know that she shouldn't have killed him, but at the same time, it's like I can understand why she reacted that way. Like, this would have been way better if the dude didn't get killed, and then you could look back on it and be like, okay, I can see why she tried to do that shit. I mean, she was acting in a moment of passion, you know, trying to win her husband back, even though she shouldn't have even tried to do that. She should have just left him alone. The husband should have just divorced her and then carried on his relationship with this young girl. But it didn't happen that way. He ended up having an affair with her and kept doing it. It's kind of like rubbing salt in wounds and shit. Like, dude, you're still with this woman who you told you had an affair, who you told that you had an affair with another woman. You're still having an affair with this woman, and you're supposed to just, and what, you'd expect the woman to just sit there and just let that shit happen? Like I said, she should have just divorced him and just left his ass. But I mean, to go through all that shit just to try to win your husband back, it's kind of like he wasn't worth trying to get back in the first place if he was willing to have an affair with you. That's all I'm really trying to say, man. Like, I'm really torn about this. Like, you can really kind of like, let me know what you guys think about this video here, man. I ain't trying to draw this fucking video out for this long, man. So thank you guys for watching this video. I'll put the link in the description box below so you guys can check out Top 5 Unknowns channel and the video in the link. So I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, peace.